What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel here. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today's video, I'm going to hopefully try to convince you to pick up an A-rig. If you are someone who does not enjoy throwing an A-rig, hopefully I'm going to give you a couple tips, some modifications, some ways to help you be more successful on the umbrella rig, A-rig, Alabama rig, whatever you want to call it. It is such a fun bite during the winter months, all the way up until the pre-spawn. Here in Texas, my typical time to throw an A-rig or really get going on an A-rig is going to be right about now in November, all the way leading up until around March in that pre-spawn time. Now, of course, regionally, if your fish spawn sooner, it dies away a lot faster. But for those of you in the northern part of the country, or even other countries, you know, when your water is a lot colder, these fish really like to key in on bigger bait balls. Now, there's several reasons out there why you might not like an A-rig, and we're gonna hopefully hit some of those points today. You know, number one, a lot of people when they first start throwing an A-rig, and myself included, when I first started throwing this, it was just big, it was cumbersome. I felt like I couldn't throw it all day. I had to have specialized rods and reels and line, and it just made my life so much more complicated. And on top of that, I had to, you know, get unsnagged a lot. I lost a lot of money in A-rigs, in jig heads and baits, and hopefully we're gonna eliminate a lot of that and cure some of those issues that a lot of people have against A-rigs. So, you know, typically, let's go ahead and start with the obvious here. A lot of people typically will start off with too big of an A-rig. Now, of course, having a bigger bait and having a much wider bait with lots of blades is very, very good for drawing in a lot of bites. But typically what people do with a bigger A-rig is they have too light of a rod. And that's number one. I think my first point is people really just make the A-rig too big and too bulky to start off. You know, the 6-inch 6.5 wire A-rig is super awesome. And one of my favorites, especially in the winter months when it gets really, really cold, is the Dominator here. They are very big profile baits. They have a lot of pull thanks to all the blades, and as wide as it gets, it's pulling a lot of water. So you have to have a lot bigger equipment to reel it in. Not only that, you know, drag in the water is a huge thing, and we're gonna be getting a little more into that. Not only that, people throw way too big of a weight on their Alabama rigs. Now, if you think about it this way, if you're putting all 5 1/4 ounce jig heads on your Alabama rig, your bait itself, just jig heads, is going to weigh over 1.25 ounces. It's gonna weigh 1.25 ounces basically, and that is if the manufacturer includes the weight of the hook on the jig head. Now, sometimes some manufacturers say it's 1/4, you know, 1/4 ounce of lead plus the hook, or it's just 1/4 ounce of lead in there. So it really just depends. Each manufacturer is a little bit different. And also, you get a little extra weight out of the hook gauge. Now, there's different types of hooks. This is another point that we'll get into later, but make sure you're throwing the right size jig head. If you throw too big of jig heads, number one, your A-rig is gonna sink down extremely, extremely fast, causing those fish to miss your bait, or it's too low for the fish. There's various reasons why having too heavy an A-rig is not beneficial for you. Moving on here, another thing is a lot of people, along with too big of an A-rig, too big of heads, they throw too big of baits on there. Now, in my opinion, there is no such thing as too big of baits. However, pairing it up with the wrong rod, the wrong reel, the wrong line, the wrong bait, it can cause a lot of issues. Now, the most typical bait I see people throw are gonna be something like this. This is the Strike King Rage Swimmer. Optionally, people will throw Kitech Easy Shad Impacts or Fat Impacts. There's so many different swim baits out there. One of my things with these rage swimmers is that they put out a lot of thump. Going back to what I was talking about earlier with water drag, is these are also ribbed swim baits. They're very wide. They're gonna pull a lot of water or pull back a lot of water against you as you're reeling. So it's gonna feel like you're having to work and work and work to reel this sucker in. So in combination with big swim baits that have a lot of drag, big jig heads that add a lot of weight, and a big profile A-rig, that causes for a lot of issues. Now, obviously, there's so many modifications you can do to your A-rig to have more success, and we're gonna talk about it right here. So starting off, a little bit smaller A-rig possibly. This is the Shane's Baits Mini Blades of Glory. This is by far one of my favorite A-rigs of all time. And I'll tell you why. Shane's baits, number one, they're relatively inexpensive. Number two, extremely durable. And number three, just extremely fun to fish, and they make a bunch of different models. You know, Hog Farmer, we don't carry them, but they also make so many different styles of A-rigs to fit the everyday angler. I land on the mini blades most of the time because it is by far one of the most versatile A-rigs I can throw. It's a nice small profile, has a very good natural thump. The line diameter or the wire diameter on these is also extremely tough, and all the terminal on it is extremely tough as well. Now, what's cool about these is it has a swiveling hanger already on it attached, and I mean, in terms of line twist, it eliminates a lot of that. So this mini blades here is super, super awesome. I believe the outside arms are 3.5, and the one straight down the middle is gonna be 5 inches. And to me, this is like a perfect small bait fish imitator. So when it comes down to it, it's not a big profile, complete opposite of some of the other ones we just talked about. Second is, again, going back to your jig heads. I like to throw 3 1/8 ounce jig heads for a total of 3/8 of an ounce of weight on my A-rig. It doesn't sound like a lot, and trust me, it's not a lot. The only extra force pulling against you is going to be the overall drag of the A-rig, and being a small profile like that, it's not really pulling that much. Now, can you go to 1/2 an ounce and, you know, put 4 1/8? Absolutely. I like to run hitchhikers or screw locks or centering pins on 2 of my A-rigs, and I've got a bunch of different videos out there showing you how exactly I like to rig this up. Now, one common theme I hear time and time again with not only high school anglers, but professional fishermen or just weekend anglers that have tried throwing an A-rig is that they break too often. Y'all, I have caught on a singular mini blades of glory, I have caught probably over at least 2 dozen bags over 20 pounds, and that's literally just my best 5 fish of the day. That's not including all the extra 5-pounders that didn't help me cull up to 30 pounds. That is just an insane amount of durability, number one, and number two, the way you bend your wire on an A-rig is very, very important. So take a look here. The typical person will take this A-rig and bend it straight at the top here. They're gonna bend a straight 90 degree, just like this. Don't do that. Think about it this way. If you've ever bent any metal any time in your life, bending a straight 90 degree in it weakens it entirely. You're taking out, I would say, dang near 50% of the overall strength in whatever metal you're bending, right? So the way I bend it is going to be more like an exponential curve leading up. I will take the wire and literally start running my finger down, you know, little by little, and causing it to really just slowly flare out just like this. You see that there, guys? It is not a straight 90 degree, it is slowly going out. And what this is gonna do, it is going to evenly disperse your blades to the center, and it's gonna hold your baits on the outside. So no matter really which way you look at it, if your bait is like this, the only baits outside the school or outside the blades are gonna be your baits, and that's what the fish are gonna key in on. So I'm gonna set this up exactly as I normally would. I'm gonna keep going down on this wire here, open it up, just like so. Let me get it going, come on. And it does take a little bit longer, I will admit that. It does take a little bit longer to slowly open up your arms, but just like that, this to me is the perfect setup for an Alabama rig. This is perfect to me because all your baits are gonna be hanging right outside all of your blades. So the only target that they can really hit first off is going to be your bait. Now, of course, this is a smaller profile, so what really happens is they just go full steam into the school. They're gonna really target one bait, either sitting on the bottom or sitting on the back. They're just gonna crash into it. They're gonna eat it. They're gonna get hooked. So back on to the jig head deal. These are Picasso jig heads. I have 2 of the exact same jig heads, both 2/0 and both 1/8 of an ounce. The biggest difference, This uses a Gamakatsu hook. This uses a Mustad hook. Really, the biggest differences in this are going to be the hooks, and that's really the only difference, to be honest, other than the paint job. Now, the hook difference matters a lot when it comes to what rod and what line you need to use. The Mustad hooks in this one are much thicker out of the box. Now, it's not the same, depending on which brand you have. The Mustad hook is usually a little bit thicker. With the Gamakatsu, these are really finesse style hooks, a lot thinner. I've boat flipped 4, 5, and 6 pounders on this hook. It is still extremely strong and doesn't require you to throw an extremely heavy rod. My exact setup, y'all, like I said, it's going to be this mini Blades of Glory, 3 1/8 ounce jig heads, along with 2 hitchhikers. Now, the baits I use are worm bar swim baits that you can buy here at Lake Pro Tackle at the worm bar. These suckers right here, I've given this juice away before. You see how thin this tail is. Number one, it's not a very wide tail. And 2, it doesn't thump extremely hard. It's very finessey. I like to size down as much as I can. I believe this swim bait is only like 3 inches, but it is extremely effective at getting bites. We have different colors of these, so make sure to stop in, pick them up. And I'm not saying an easy shiner or an easy shaker is not gonna work. Trust me, these are the ones I use because they are extremely durable and they get the job done. They have just a barely any finesse action out of them, and it's super awesome. Going back to the different styles of swim baits. This swim bait here is what I call a hammer tail style swim bait, where that tail sits at 90 degrees and it's going to thump extremely, extremely hard. This guy right here, this tail, sits at almost a 30-degree angle. I don't know if you can really pick that up. It really sits at like a 30-degree angle and it barely sways. This one here, just like a rage swimmer with a little bit more inclined action, it's going to really give you a bunch of tail wobble, and it's going to create more drag for you. So again, my exact setup: 3 1/8 ounce jig heads, mini Blades of Glory, 2 decoys up top. And what that's going to do is when you put the jig heads on here, it's going to weight it down. I put the 2 right next to each other, 2 hitchhikers on the top and 1 jig head down the middle. If you need to go heavier, you can go to a 1/4 ounce in the middle. It's going to do basically the exact same thing. Your ones at the bottom are going to keel it down, always putting your jig heads closer to the fish. 99% of the time, your fish that eat an A-rig are going to eat the bottom 2 or the back one. They are almost never, and this is like after thousands and thousands of fish that I've observed on LiveScope, almost never will they eat the top baits. Reason for that is because fish have eyes on the top of their head. So they are eating upwards almost every single time, unless it's like a bed fishing scenario where they literally have to like do a somersault, aim down, and actually look at your bait that way. That is the only time fish really eat downwards, unless they're pinning something to the bottom actively, they're chasing it, they can track it, and then they pin it down. But with an A-rig, typically you're going to be reeling it above their heads. And this leads me into my next topic here. When it comes to your line size and the line size that you really need for an A-rig, I will vary from anywhere from 15-pound line with my extremely light Alabama rigs that I want to be able to fish in clearer water, and I will go up typically to around 18-pound line for my typical Alabama rigs. Now, of course, if I throw one even bigger than that 6-inch one or the Dominator, I might go up to 20, but typically I won't go over 18-pound fluorocarbon. When it comes to line diameter and line size and line pound test, there are really two schools of thought that I have on this. I can throw fluorocarbon or I could throw braided line. I will 90% of the time throw fluorocarbon. If I am in extremely thick cover where I really don't want to lose an Alabama rig, I might go braided line, but these two right here have the exact same line diameter. This is 65-pound braid. This right here is 18-pound Seagar Mastiff. This Mastiff is extremely, extremely strong, and if you invest in some good fluorocarbon, it's going to treat you right. So the main difference between the two, number one, I do want to say braided line is a lot louder in the water. The way it cuts through and the frequency it puts off to me, turns the fish off of it a lot, especially if they are pressured quite a bit. The only scenario I can personally think of throwing braided line on an Alabama rig is going to be extremely heavy cover, like timber, brush piles, something like that, where I can just wrench it out. I don't have to worry about losing my A-rig, hopefully. But typically, 18-pound line is pretty dang hard to break. I've gotten snagged in rocks, I've gotten snagged in trees. I've been able to get my A-rig back because, again, I throw lighter hooks. So if it does get hooked, I just bend it out. I mean, those hooks will bend at around 15 pounds of just pure strength, or really probably more than that. Honestly, probably like 20 pounds. It'll bend out and you can pop it out. But to be honest, 18-pound Mastiff will not break exactly at 18. American lines are a little bit different in the fact that it's based on relative line breakage. So this will probably break at around 25 to be realistic, but that's besides the point. That's for another day, another video. So typically I'm throwing fluorocarbon. Again, it's going to come through the water a lot easier. It gives me very good sensitivity still. Braided line does too. I throw pretty limber rods. So my setup here, going back to the Alabama rig, the way I set it up, what I've been talking about many times in this video, hopefully you're paying attention. I will throw this on a 7'2" medium heavy rod. And I'm talking like pretty limber medium heavy. I'm talking almost like, I don't know, like a Daiwa Kage power jerkbait rod. If you watch that video, I could probably throw this Alabama rig on that and be totally fine. You don't need specialized equipment for the way I set this sucker up here. And I'm telling you, you don't need specialized line or specialized reel. I throw this on a 100 size reel. Actually it might be a 150, I guess. It's the Tatula Elite or the Corrado 150 are perfect. You don't need anything bigger than that. If you're a luge guy, you can throw it on an MP, you could throw it on an whatever other luge reels there are. The new Custom Pro, Custom Gen 3, those are all great options. Getting a call here, but I'll just let it go to voicemail. Anyway, guys, that is how I set the Alabama rig up. And again, you don't need specialized equipment for it. Trust me, I have been throwing this sucker a lot, and I appreciate the people over at Shane's Baits for making such an awesome rig. So thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any questions or you want to contribute to the conversation, leave a comment down below. I greatly appreciate it. And if you aren't subscribed, please consider subscribing. We just hit 4,000 subscribers and we're on our way up to 5. So let's make it happen. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you, and we'll see you next time at Lake Pro Tackle. See you guys.